Hi, I'm Femi OK. Today on the stream, I am starting with a beautiful vision, an integrated, prosperous and peaceful Africa, driven by its own citizens, representing a dynamic force in the global arena. That is how the African Union, a pan-African organisation, describes itself. Originally set up to supply African solutions for African challenges, to create a more peaceful continent and one that is richer as well. That is the mission. But how is the AU delivering? That is the conversation that we're about to have on Twitter or on YouTube. You can join in. The African Union's finest moments, the African Union's worst moments. What you think the African Union could do better? Your suggestions, your ideas, pop them right here on YouTube and be part of today's show.
Across the African continent today, there are many reasons for African states to believe they no longer need the African Union. This comes on the heels of the recent military coups that have taken place in West Africa, whereas the African Union has simply responded through statements of condemnation. On the other hand, the African Union still remains very relevant, particularly given the fact that across the continent, there is an unequal distribution of power relations, whereby there are regional hegemons across the continent who have a tendency to exert their own will and influence as well as interests above those of others. And so the African Union serves as a regulatory body in this regard.
So this week, Africans around the continent will be celebrating African Unity Day. It really is the day where Africans mark the idea that they have an organisation that is a pan-African organisation. Let's dig a little bit deeper into that and how the AU is doing. Hello, Boholo. Hello, Ibrahim. So good to have you, two young Africans, wise and ready to talk to us. Boholo, please introduce yourself to our audience. Welcome back to the stream.
Thank you very much, Femi. It's such a pleasure to be able to join you today. As you introduced me, my name is Boholo Ndlovu, and I'm from Botswana. I'm an economist and a development professional and the former Minister of Investment, Trade and Industry here in Botswana.
Good to have you. Ibrahim, lovely to have you on the stream. Please greet our international audience.
Thanks for having me, Femi, and thanks for joining the call, Bukolo. My name is Ibrahim Babatunde Anoba, and I'm originally from Lagos. I work for an organization called the Atlas Network in Washington, D.C., where we work along public policy organization, think tanks, to try to solve problems mitigating prosperity on the continent of Africa. Thank you.
All right, lovely to have you. All right, guests, I do not want you to hesitate. The first thing that comes into your mind when I say African Union, Ibrahim.
You see, it's so great that we're having this conversation right now. I mean, it's been 59 years since the Organization of African Unity was founded. And whenever I come across the organization, the African Union, or when I'm actually reading my history books on Pan-Africanism, what actually comes to mind is the ideas that you read of when you consult the founding days of the African Union or the OAU. I mean, this, to a large extent, was created by the Ghanaian Labour Union, the CPP in Ghana, and Kwame Nkrumah, who organized in 1958, All African People's Congress. And when you read conversation in that convention, the aspiration was so high. They wanted an Africa that we unite the continent, that we speak together in terms of economic potential, economic prosperity, that we come together to secure collectively the continent's security. And 59 years fast forward, you look at the African Union that we have now, I kind of question how far have we been able to actualize those hopes by those set of 58. So it's a big conversation, and I'm glad to be on it.
Boholo, when I say African Union, the first thing that comes into your mind, no filter, is what?
Unity, common purpose, bureaucracy, lack of implementation, hope, Africa rising. So it's a mixed bag, really, for me, because I believe in what the AU was created for, and I believe in what the AU can be. And I believe that we all have a role to play in creating what it should be. And so when I think about it, I think of its failures, I think of its successes, but most importantly, I just think of the Africa that I want and I know that everybody else wants, and what role that the AU can play in. And that's why the mixed bag that I gave you really jumps up to me.
Yeah, I should say that there is a difference between the African Union and the African Union Commission. The African Union is, the heads of state that we all see standing there, taking the class photograph from whatever meeting they're at. We often think of the African Union as those heads of state, incredibly powerful people. They may well be, but who implements the policy of the African Union is the African Union Commission. So bureaucrats do that work. Sometimes we mix up those two things. I know Ibrahim, I know Boholo, you do not. But our audience may well think, well, these heads of state, they can do whatever they want. But behind them, there is bureaucracy, and that makes a difference. I want to start sort of in a place that we don't usually start when we talk about the African Union, finest moments. For me, I'm thinking about the reaction to COVID, the pandemic, and how this incredible union got together and fought for Africans. Boholo, pick up from there.
I think there's actually something to be said about what you just mentioned before of the African Union versus the AUC versus other institutions under the AUC. And I think that clarity needs to be given, because it's not just the heads of states, there's also the technocratic part that doesn't have as full an autonomy, as one would think. So we could compare the AUC maybe to the UN or to the regional economic bloc, SADC, ECOWAS, and so forth, and really try to understand the kind of power and authority that they truly have in implementing the things that are being discussed at the AU. So it goes beyond the heads of states meeting. Once there are some recommendations that come out of the AU, and then the AUC tries to implement, they are not necessarily the implementing body.
Yeah, this is probably why people get disappointed. But I want to go back to my finest moment for the African Union was quite a recent one, which was the reaction to COVID. What is your finest moment for the African Union? Because there's lots to critique about, but let's start with the positive.
I think you took away from me, because being able to really secure over 1 billion COVID vaccines was top of the list for me. And the way that the AU managed to really gather and rally around this COVID vaccine response is absolutely shows what collective responsibility and collective association can do towards facilitating delivery of key services to the populace. Then in addition to that, for me, there's also the AfCFTA, so the African Continental Free Trade Area. For me, that is a big milestone, having countries ratifying, agreeing to increasing trade within the African continent, ensuring that once fully implemented, it becomes the largest trading bloc in the world, and being able to create millions of jobs and adding to GDP, not only in Africa, but to the rest of the world. For me, that in itself, giving pieces of autonomy to what's this agreement is one of the high achievements of the AU to date. And I believe that there is a lot more that we can expect from the AfCFTA.
I should mention, Ibrahim, that we were expected to be joined by a vibrant young member of the African Union, but the bureaucracy has got the better of us. We are still waiting for this vibrant young member of the African Union to get clearance to be on this show. I am guessing the clearance will not come in time. But talking about young people, I want to bring this YouTube comment to you. This is for Shivance. He says the African Union can do a better job of including the new generation of Africans and leave it to smaller bodies. What do you think about that, the idea of young people actually having a voice? Because our African continent is full of young people. Ibrahim.
Exactly, Femi. This is one of the examples of how the African Union is not to a large extent reflective of what the continent looks like. I mean, Africa's population, majority of us are women, and a vast, significant portion of our population demographic are people below the age of 35. But you look at the African Union, you look at people heading things, so that people that are supposed to be giving us advice on how to go about our economic and social life. I mean, these are people below the age of 65. And it's so strong that if you do not live a people's reality, you do not, live with them every day. You're not in the same.
Why is that, Ibrahim? I'm going to show some pictures of the last African Union big meeting in February. Tell me what you noticed when we showed these pictures. Keep going, Ibrahim. I'm going to show you the pictures.
Exactly.
What do you see there?
See, these are just like, men who have been in power for God knows how long. They've lived a significant portion of their life being privileged. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so many men. You can count the women there. I mean, so those are the two key questions. Do we have an African Union that looks like us, that represent the youth, that represent women, that represent minority communities, not just, old men and, with privileged history? We really have to exclude the African Union from this masculine archetype that has dominated its existence since 1963.
But how do you address that? Because I really want us not to just critique, but also offer some suggestions and some solutions as well. And as Africans, we respect our elders completely.
Exactly.
But, Boholo, pick up from the but.
I actually want to say, once you get into the workspace, we are all colleagues. Mm-hmm. Having been in that space, I don't think it's right for us to start thinking that they're elders and then they're younger people. Because once you become active in the policy space, then you're colleagues. And so we should be we should require for more inclusivity, diversity in decision making, and we should see it in our leaders being represented.
But how does that happen?
There.
Do you ask
it's a pipeline.
Those men of the AU, can we have more women and more young people? Aren't they going to just say no?
It's at home, Femi.
I'm sorry to cut you, but really, this is the problem. This is the problem, Bukholo. It's really not enough for us to come into the same space as Africans, and because
Bukholo is bringing her wisdom from being a minister. She's being very careful here. I'm just like, get rid of the old men.
No,
Bukholo, go ahead.
Exactly. I'm not being careful. I just feel like it comes from being at home. Yeah. It starts with the politics domestically, because what is at the AU reflects what is happening at home. Mm-hmm. So you can't have the AU looking differently when the politics domestically do not reflect that. So it needs to start with the empowerment of women in politics.
Couldn't the AU set the standard for the African countries to then follow? Couldn't it be more diverse? Couldn't it be younger? Is that impossible to ask for?
What the AU could do is that in the commissions, you start to see that diversity. But when you expect to see the AU summit looking diverse, that starts at home. Do we have women being included in national politics? Do we have women as ministers, opportunity for them to be heads of state? Are the policies allowing for such an empowerment? And if that doesn't happen at home, you will not see different faces at the AU summit. Now, the AUC is a whole different ballgame. That can be said that we want to see diversity there. We can see more women in higher positions. We can see young people, for example, when we have still the AU youth representative, it's because of a determination that was made there. Now, that's at the AUC. Okay. It's not at the AU summit at heads of states level.
All right. So the AU actually, at this very moment, is undergoing a period of reform. Earlier, we spoke to Simon Allison. He's the editor-in-chief of The Continent. That is a pan-African newspaper. This is what Simon told us. I want you to have a listen to Simon Ibrahim and then give us one important reform that you feel could really help the AU going forward. Here's Simon, first of all.
I've done a lot of reporting on the African Union, including on some of its worst aspects. Investigations into sexual harassment, fraud, corruption. And yet, I would still argue that the continent is a better place with it than without it. And that's because we need an institution that is able to present a unified African voice, that is able to argue for Africa's place on the international stage and plan for the continent's long-term future as a whole, not as individual countries, because there is no power in individual countries. There is power in collective action. And as the African Union reforms itself, which it is in the process of doing, it will only get more and more powerful and better able to represent us.
See, Femi, what Simon says is absolutely spot on. But before I comment on that, I would say if you look at the commission, the different commissions within the AU, they actually are not so diverse as Bukolo is saying. I mean, you look at many of these people in the subcommission, the Pan-African Congress, and other numerous organs of the AU. They are people who have been in politics in their respective countries for so long. I mean, these are men above the age of 50, majority of them. So I'm really questioning the diversity we're actually pointing to right here. But back to what Simon
I was
said,
actually saying that the AUC can in itself be diverse. I wasn't saying that it is. I'm saying for you to see the diversity at the AU summit, heads of state, that starts at home. Now you can determine for the AU Commission to have the diversity through the hiring policies that can be put in place. Those are two different things.
Exactly.
You can't say we want to see different heads of state that are diverse when you don't address the policies at home.
Exactly. But then if the question is the AUC as diverse as it should be, the answer is no. But back to what Simon said, it's absolutely spot on when we say the African Union has to reform. But what are the reforms we're talking about? I mean, Femi, you look at the recent coups in Mali, Burkina Faso, and Guinea. What did the African Union do? Come out to condemn the military leaders. But what was the African Union doing before those coups actually happened? So that's the question we need to ask. That's the first reform that needs to be done.
Ibrahim, we did a show on the stream a little while ago, which was about how many coups there were on the African continent. And there were so many. We did a whole half-an-hour conversation about them. But let me push you here. It is easy to critique the African Union, far too easy. What, if you had one reform, if you could sit in Addis and you could do one thing and it would happen, Ibrahim, what would it be? I'm sure the AU is watching right now.
Exactly.
I'm sure they're watching right now.
See, Femi, my question will be to them. So what actually happened with the Malabo protocol? I mean, this is supposed, if it's applied in its broader sense, to ensure that the African Union has impetus in place, or structures in place to engage leaders that abuse power in their respective countries or will go against certain AU charters and provisions before situations in those countries degenerate into chaos, which of course invites coup. So what is happening with that protocol? Has it been ratified fully? Has it been fully implemented in its entirety? So these are some of the basic steps we need to take.
So you would ask them questions. All right, so I'm going to go to Solomon here. Solomon spoke to us a little bit earlier. He's the founding director of Amani Africa. I'm going to put Solomon's thoughts to you, Boholo, and then I want you to come off the back of them with something practical that you could see the AU doing in the future that would be even more helpful to the African citizens across the continent. First of all, here's Solomon.
There are three areas worth noting in terms of the impact of the African Union. The first is in terms of the articulation of a shared vision for the political and socio-economic transformation of the continent. The second is in developing norms and policies that provide legal and political resources for the empowerment of African citizenry. The third is in providing a common platform for mobilizing collective action in response to the peace and security challenge and also challenges such as the COVID-19 pandemic. In terms of changing and improving the African Union, there are three things that need to happen. First is addressing the implementation gap that the African Union suffers from. The second is holding governments to account for the commitments that they have made. And the third and important is to shift the AU from we the heads of state and government to we the people of Africa.
All right. I would agree with him. I mean, for me, right at the top of my list, Femi, is to ensure that the AU is being domestically financed. Right now, approximately or between 60 to 90% of the budget comes from external sources. So we still have a lot of donor funding going into AU implementation of projects, even the convening. And I think that in itself takes away from the aspect of Africa for Africa, so dealing with our issues by ourselves. And then secondly, it is that we need to have a lot more coordination and financing and autonomy for some of our AU institutions, particularly those in the economic and financial spaces, because we need for them to deal quite practically and immediately on issues of perception of risk of investing in the continent and dealing with investing in our transboundary and cross-country projects that can help to alleviate some of the infrastructural needs that we have. At this moment, we're talking about over $100 million deficit that we have in infrastructure investment and capitalization. And I think if NAPID, AU, AFDB and AFRICZIM were able to coordinate much better together with the AFCFTA Secretariat, we would be in a better place to
you're taking us down. Acronym City, thank you so much. These are financial institutions on the African continent. Trust the former cabinet minister to be throwing out the acronyms like there's no tomorrow.
I apologize.
I'm putting you in the naughty corner. All right, come back here to Come back here, show off. Come back here to my laptop. On Twitter, we asked people about the African Union, and Twitter roasted the African Union. Seriously roasted. Edwin, good-for-nothing union that needs total overhauling. Literally has zero impact, says Nigel. Not even a million miles near its objectives, all because of greedy leaders who are benefiting from bad systems everywhere. Good-for-nothing union. And one more, the purpose that it is being used to build the power of individual dictatorial leaders to attack their own citizens and to satisfy their own pocket. There is a Pan-African organisation called Africans Rising. They are marking African Union Day with a whole week of activities involving young people, involving diversity, involving the Africa that we want, the Africa that African citizens want. This is what their movement coordinator told us a few hours ago. Have a listen, have a look.
AU have been created in 1963 to serve and deliver a dignified life for all Africans wherever they are. Some of the progressive laws have been passed by this body, but the reality of the reflection of these policies on the lives of Africans has been questioned by many. Our leaders, our forefathers have promised and dreamed to have a united state of Africa, but how much have been achieved has been questioned. Africans are not able to move around within Africa. They've seen the body been serving the interests of leaders rather than Africa. The body doesn't have the powers to hold leaders accountable. The citizens are actually losing confidence and hope in the body.
All right, guests, we have 2 minutes left and so many questions from our audience. I'm going to ask you to do the speed round. So in 20 seconds or less, answer these questions. Ibrahim, you start with this first one. This is a teacher who works in computer science. David says, please, what does the AU do? Ibrahim, 20 seconds, go.
Well, the AU, what it does, I don't know how to describe it, because you have an organization that's supposed to prevent, conflict or insecurity in the continent and, bring leaders together to ensure that, the continent moves together in terms of economic prosperity. And you look at security, you look at economic prosperity.
Time up, Ibrahim.
As those two things actually manifested in Africa, I don't think they have. So that's the answer.
Boholo, one of our commenters on YouTube said, can we have a Pan-African currency? Would that even work? Go ahead.
I think we will not see that happening anytime soon. However, there is a payment system that is meant to regularize the differences in our currencies at the moment that is supposed to support our ambitions of intra-Africa trade because of how far off we are from having a Pan-African currency. It's because of the different monetary policies that we have and other fiscal issues that we have.
All right, we have so much more to talk about. So many comments on YouTube. YouTubers, thank you so much for taking part in this program. And also Boholo and Ibrahim, really appreciate you. A different face of Africa that we don't get to see every day. Young people, diversity, we nailed it here on the stream. Thank you so much. We appreciate you. I'll see you next time. Take care, everybody.